The city park was quiet that afternoon, a rare pause in the usual bustle of honking cars, joggers, and children's laughter. Autumn leaves painted the ground in gold and crimson, swirling gently in the crisp breeze. Among the benches lining the walking path, most people were lost in their own worlds, scrolling on phones, chatting with friends, or simply watching the world go by. Clara Bennett, a young woman in her early 20s, carried a small paper bag clutched to her chest as she strolled through the park. Inside was the only treat she had allowed herself that week, a chocolate croissant she had purchased, after skipping lunch to save a few dollars. She had been working long hours at the local bakery, barely making ends meet, and this small indulgence was a rare luxury she rarely afforded. Her plan had been simple: find a quiet bench, sit and enjoy the pastry while taking a short break from her demanding life. But as she walked, she noticed a man sitting slumped on a bench nearby. He was older, perhaps in his late 40s, with a worn coat and tired eyes. His posture radiated sadness, the kind of deep, unspoken pain that made the rest of the world feel distant. Clara hesitated. The logical part of her mind told her to ignore him. After all, she had worked hard for this treat, and she deserved it. But a softer part of her, one that had always been sensitive to human suffering, urged her forward. She approached the bench slowly, her steps tentative. "Excuse me," she said softly. The man looked up, startled, as if he hadn't noticed anyone around him. His eyes were a muted gray, clouded with weariness. "Are you okay?" He shook his head slightly, not saying anything. His silence spoke volumes. Clara sat down beside him, careful not to invade his space, and unwrapped the croissant. "I know this probably doesn't help much," she said quietly, offering the pastry to him, "but would you like to share this with me?" The man's eyes widened. He glanced at the croissant, then back at her, as if unsure what to make of the gesture. Finally, he shook his head gently. I couldn't," he murmured. Clara smiled softly, undeterred. "I insist. I can always get another one tomorrow. You need this more than I do right now." There was a long pause. The man's hands trembled slightly as he reached for the croissant, finally taking it with a small, grateful nod. He took a bite and closed his eyes, savoring the simple sweetness. Clara watched him quietly, feeling a strange mix of empathy and curiosity. "Thank you," he said after a few moments. His voice was rough, yet there was warmth underneath the fatigue. "It's been a while since someone offered me something so simple, without asking for anything in return." Clara shrugged modestly. "Everyone has hard days. Sometimes a little kindness can help more than we realize." He looked at her with a faint, almost shy smile. "You have a good heart, miss." "Clara," she replied. "Clara Bennett." "And you?" The man hesitated, then said softly, "Just call me Mr. Gray for now." "It's complicated." As they sat together on the bench, sharing the small pastry, Clara noticed the subtle details about him. The expensive leather shoes peeking from under the worn coat, the faint scent of a rich cologne, the careful way he handled his briefcase tucked beside him. There was a contrast between his outward appearance and his current state, a juxtaposition that hinted at a story hidden beneath the surface. Clara didn't press. She had learned long ago that some people shared their lives in their own time, not on someone else's schedule. She simply offered quiet companionship, a listening presence, and the reassurance that not all encounters had to be transactional. The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the park. Children's laughter echoed faintly in the distance, and the crisp wind rustled the leaves around them. Clara realized she had spent more time with Mr. Gray than she had intended. She had planned only to rest and enjoy a croissant. Yet here she was, deeply immersed in the quiet story of a stranger's pain and humanity. Finally, Mr. Gray spoke again. "You know, I shouldn't even be here," he said quietly. "I have responsibilities, obligations. People expect me to be someone I'm not supposed to feel like this. And yet, you sit here, giving without expecting anything. It's extraordinary." Clara smiled gently. "Sometimes people just need a moment, a reminder that they're seen, that they matter. No titles, no expectations, just human kindness. He nodded, his eyes reflecting a depth of emotion that Clara had not anticipated. You're right. And that's why. What you did today, it matters more than you know. Clara's heart fluttered with an unspoken question, an instinctive curiosity about the man who had evoked such vulnerability. She wanted to know more, but she also understood the delicacy of the moment. Some stories unfolded slowly, revealing themselves piece by piece, and forcing them too quickly often destroyed the magic of discovery. As the sky turned shades of pink and orange, Clara stood, brushing crumbs from her hands. I should get back to work, she said softly. But thank you for letting me share this moment with you. Mr. Gray nodded, clutching the remnants of the croissant. Thank you, Clara. Truly. They parted ways, each carrying a small spark of connection that neither fully understood yet. Clara returned to her job at the bakery, her mind replaying the encounter repeatedly. She couldn't shake the feeling that this man, so ordinary in his vulnerability yet strangely compelling, was someone she would see again. Unbeknownst to Clara, Mr. Gray's life was far from ordinary. He wasn't simply a man burdened with the weight of the day. He was a powerful figure, someone whose decisions influenced thousands, whose presence commanded respect in circles Clara had never dreamed of entering. The croissant she had offered, simple and selfless, had unknowingly bridged two worlds, one of struggle and survival, and one of influence and power. That small act of kindness, giving her only treat to a sad man on a park bench, was about to set in motion a chain of events that would change her life in ways she could never have imagined. The days following that chance encounter in the park were unusually vivid in Clara's mind. She found herself thinking about Mr. Gray more often than she expected. There was something about the way he had received her small gesture of kindness, the raw honesty in his eyes, that lingered. She tried to brush it off, attributing it to curiosity, yet a quiet part of her wondered why a stranger's gratitude felt so significant. At the bakery, life continued its usual rhythm. The smell of bread, the clatter of trays, and the steady hum of customers became her comfort zone. Clara moved with her usual efficiency, but her thoughts were often elsewhere, circling back to the man on the bench. Then, one morning, she received an unexpected visitor. A car pulled up outside the bakery, a sleek black vehicle that seemed far out of place in the modest neighborhood. The driver stepped out, well-dressed and professional, and approached the door. "Clara Bennett?" the man asked politely, glancing at a small notebook. Clara blinked, surprised. "Yes, that's me. Can I help you?" "I'm Thomas Hale," the man said, extending a hand. "I work with Mr. Gray. He asked me to deliver this to you." Confused, Clara took the envelope he handed her. It was thick, cream-colored, with elegant handwriting spelling her name. She opened it carefully, revealing an invitation, not to a party, not to a meeting, but to lunch at a quiet private restaurant downtown. He sent this?" Clara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," Thomas replied. "He said it was important." That afternoon, Clara arrived at the restaurant, her heart pounding. The place was elegant yet understated, with soft lighting and quiet music playing in the background. She was led to a private table, where Mr. Gray awaited. He looked different outside the park. His posture was upright, his suit tailored, and there was a quiet authority in his demeanor that Clara had only glimpsed before. Yet when he smiled at her, there was warmth, not intimidation. "Clara," he began, his voice soft but confident. "Thank you for meeting me." She nodded, still unsure what to expect. I didn't think you'd remember me, let alone invite me here." "I remembered," he said. "More than you know. The day in the park. It wasn't just a croissant. It was a gesture that reminded me of something I had almost forgotten. The simple humanity that often gets lost when life becomes consumed by obligations, power, and expectations." Clara listened, fascinated. She had no idea who this man really was, only that he carried a weight she could sense but not fully understand. As lunch progressed, Clara realized that Mr. Gray wasn't asking for anything. He wasn't offering charity or patronage. Instead, he was engaging her in conversation, asking about her life, her dreams, and her aspirations. For the first time, she felt seen, not as a waitress, not as a struggling young woman, but as someone with depth, intelligence, and worth. "You have a rare quality," he said at one point, his eyes meeting hers. "You care without expectation. You notice people without judgment. That's a strength many people in my position lack. It's refreshing." Clara felt a blush rise to her cheeks. "I don't know if it's a strength," she said quietly. "I just try to be kind when I can. Life is hard enough without adding more misery to it." "Kindness," he said thoughtfully, "is the foundation of every great relationship, business, personal or otherwise, and the world would be a better place if more people like you existed." Over the next few weeks, Clara and Mr. Gray met occasionally, always in settings that were calm and private. She learned small things about him: his preference for simplicity despite immense wealth, his tendency to observe quietly before acting, and his deep sense of responsibility toward the people around him. What Clara did not yet know was the true scale of his world. Mr. Gray was a billionaire, CEO of one of the country's most influential companies. His life was filled with boardrooms, negotiations, and decisions that affected thousands. But with Clara, he allowed himself to step from that life, to simply be a human being, vulnerable and reflective. For Clara, these meetings were transformative. She began to see that her life, though modest, had value beyond what she had imagined. Her small acts of kindness, her attention to others, and her ability to empathize were traits that people, sometimes even powerful people, recognized and cherished. Then came the first hint that her life might intersect with his world in ways she had never imagined. One afternoon, Mr. Gray asked her to join him at a community project he was sponsoring. It wasn't glamorous. It involved helping at a local center, organizing meals, and interacting with families who struggled daily. "I want you to come," he said, "not because I need help, but because I want you to see how your kindness could create change on a bigger scale. You have a gift, Clara. You just don't know how far it can reach." Clara hesitated, overwhelmed by the thought of stepping into his world. But something inside her stirred, the same curiosity and courage that had led her to share that croissant weeks before. She agreed. The day of the project, she worked side by side with volunteers, meeting families, listening to their stories, and helping in practical ways. She discovered that her empathy and insight were invaluable, that her ability to connect with people, to understand their struggles without judgment, had real impact. By the end of the day, Mr. Gray pulled her aside. "Do you see now?" he asked gently. "Your compassion, your care, they don't have to be small gestures. They can ripple outward, affecting lives you never imagined." Clara smiled, a mixture of awe and newfound confidence. I never thought of it that way. I always felt my life was too small, my actions insignificant." He shook his head. "Never underestimate the power of simple acts, and never doubt that someone like you can influence a world far beyond the bench where we met." Clara left that day with a sense of possibility she had never felt before. She had given her only treat to a sad man on a bench without knowing who he really was. And in doing so, she had unknowingly stepped into a world that would soon open doors she had never dreamed existed. The weeks that followed Clara's first visit to the community project were a whirlwind of new experiences. Mr. Gray continued to involve her in various initiatives, each one designed to help those less fortunate, while also testing her abilities and judgment. It wasn't just about charity, it was about strategy, empathy, and leadership. Clara found herself navigating spaces she had never imagined entering. Boardrooms filled with corporate executives, planning meetings with nonprofit leaders, and public events where she was expected to speak on behalf of the initiatives. At first, the sheer magnitude of it all was overwhelming. She had spent her life behind a counter, serving pastries and coffee, and suddenly she was asked to make decisions, organize programs, and even present ideas to people far more experienced than herself. Yet, she discovered something remarkable about herself. She was capable. Every interaction, every decision, revealed a resourcefulness and clarity she had never trusted before. Her empathy, honed by years of listening to customers and quietly observing people, became a powerful tool. She didn't just manage logistics, she understood the people affected by those logistics, and she instinctively knew what would help them most. Mr. Gray watched her quietly during these early days, impressed not only by her intelligence, but by her humility. She asked questions, listened more than she spoke, and was unafraid to admit when she didn't know something. "You have a rare combination," he remarked one afternoon as they reviewed plans for an upcoming project. "Most people with your potential would be arrogant or insecure. You are neither. You're just you." Clara felt a warmth in his words that went beyond mere praise. There was a sense of trust, a recognition that she belonged in these spaces, despite her humble beginnings. "I'm trying," she admitted softly. "I've never done anything like this before." "Trying is enough," he said. "It's how extraordinary things begin." Her confidence grew as she took on more responsibilities. Clara began coordinating volunteers, managing resources, and even suggesting improvements to the programs. Each time she spoke, people listened. Each time she acted, results followed. The realization struck her gradually. Her life had been far larger than she imagined, not because of wealth or status, but because of her capacity to care and act. It was during a particularly challenging project, setting up a temporary shelter for families displaced by a fire, that Clara truly recognized the scope of her influence. Supplies had been delayed, volunteers were exhausted, and tempers were fraying. Many would have panicked. Clara didn't. She calmly assessed the situation, delegated tasks, and personally assisted families with warmth and efficiency. By the end of the day, the shelter was fully operational, and the families were safe and fed. Mr. Gray, observing from a distance, was quietly amazed. He approached her as the last family settled in. "Clara," he said, voice low but full of respect, "you have a gift. People follow you because you genuinely care. They trust you because you're honest and capable. Few can inspire that." Clara's eyes filled with tears, not from fatigue, but from the validation she had long craved. All her small acts of kindness, starting with a single croissant on a park bench, had led to this moment. Despite her successes, there were challenges. Some of Mr. Gray's company leagues were skeptical of her presence, questioning how a young woman with no prior experience in management could be entrusted with such responsibilities. Clara faced subtle tests of competence and character, often feeling the pressure of high expectations. Yet, each time, she rose to the occasion. She relied on intuition, empathy, and careful observation, skills honed in years of humble work, and paired them with determination and courage. Slowly, even the skeptics began to acknowledge her talent. Her suggestions were considered, her leadership respected, and her judgment trusted. Through it all, Clara and Mr. Gray's bond deepened. It was not romantic, at least not yet, but it was built on trust, respect, and shared purpose. He provided guidance, answered her questions, and occasionally challenged her to think beyond her comfort zone. She in turn reminded him of humanity, simplicity, and the power of genuine kindness. One evening, after a long day of coordinating a city-wide food drive, Clara and Mr. Gray walked through the park where they had first met. The leaves were turning golden, the air crisp with early winter chill. "Do you remember the bench?" he asked, a faint smile on his lips. Clara laughed softly. "How could I forget? That's where it all started. A croissant, a sad man, and a stranger who turned out to be someone extraordinary." I was the sad man, he said, smiling. But you didn't see me for my troubles or my position. You saw me as a person, and that's rare. That's why I never forgot you. Clara's heart warmed. I didn't know who you really were. I just wanted to help, and that's exactly why you mattered, he said. It's simple gestures that reveal character. Yours revealed a leader before anyone else even noticed. As winter settled over the city, Clara realized she was no longer the same person who had nervously offered a croissant on a bench. She had grown, been tested, and discovered her own strength. Opportunities she never imagined were opening before her, all because someone had given her the chance to be seen, and she had taken it. Little did she know, the full impact of her kindness was only beginning to unfold. Mr. Gray, in his powerful position, had plans for initiatives far beyond the park, the shelter, or the food drive. And Clara's involvement, born from a simple act of compassion, would soon place her in a position that could change not only her life, but the lives of thousands she was yet to meet. The opportunity came on a chilly December morning. Clara arrived at the usual meeting place in the park, thinking it would be another small project discussion. Instead, Mr. Gray handed her an envelope. "This is something new," he said, his eyes serious but warm. "Open it when you're alone." Curious and slightly nervous, Clara waited until she was back at her small apartment to open the envelope. Inside was an official invitation to join one of Mr. Gray's philanthropic boards, a team dedicated to creating sustainable programs for underserved communities. But it wasn't just an invitation. It included a formal offer for a paid position as a coordinator, allowing her to make real decisions, manage budgets, and implement programs across the city. Clara sank into her chair, heart racing. She had never imagined herself in such a role. The idea of managing resources, coordinating with influential people, and representing initiatives at a high level was exhilarating and terrifying. She had worked her whole life for small moments of survival. Now, she was being trusted to make a tangible impact on thousands of lives. The first day in her new role was overwhelming. Clara arrived at Mr. Gray's office building, a sleek high-rise overlooking the city. The lobby alone intimidated her. The marble floors, the concierge, the hum of executives moving with purpose. She adjusted her jacket nervously and took a deep breath. Mr. Gray greeted her with a reassuring smile. "Remember, Clara," he said, "you're here because of your compassion, your insight, and your integrity. The rest will follow naturally." She nodded, determined to live up to the trust he had placed in her. Her day began with a briefing. She was introduced to staff, handed documents, and given her first assignment, a proposal to design an after-school program for children in underserved neighborhoods. Clara spent the day absorbing information, asking thoughtful questions, and quietly observing how the organization operated. Challenges arose almost immediately. Clara discovered that working in such a structured environment required a balance of tact, diplomacy, and decisiveness, skills she had used instinctively in small ways, but now needed to apply strategically. She encountered skepticism from some colleagues who underestimated her background. One board member, in particular, questioned her ability to manage the program. "Are you sure someone with so little professional experience can handle this?" he asked, his tone dismissive. Clara felt a flash of fear but remembered the lessons of her journey. Kindness, empathy, and observation could coexist with confidence and competence. "I understand your concern," she said calmly, "but I've worked with communities directly, managed resources under pressure, and collaborated with volunteers and professionals alike. I welcome the opportunity to prove that experience and insight come in many forms." The board member's frown softened slightly, though he remained cautious. Clara felt a surge of quiet pride. She had faced skepticism before, but now she was proving that her humble beginnings were not a limitation, they were a foundation. Weeks turned into months, and Clara excelled. She coordinated multiple initiatives, oversaw budgets, and presented proposals to city officials and donors. Her ability to connect with people, to see their needs clearly and act decisively, made her an invaluable asset. She began to understand the full scope of Mr. Gray's world, the influence, the responsibility, and the power to effect real change. Throughout it all, she remained grounded. She never forgot the park bench, the chocolate croissant, or the moment she had acted purely out of kindness. That small act had been the seed, and now it was growing into something far larger than she had ever imagined. Mr. Gray watched her quietly during meetings, never interfering unless guidance was needed. "You're becoming a remarkable leader," he said one afternoon, after she successfully negotiated additional funding for a citywide program. "And all of this started because you cared, genuinely, about one person on a bench." Clara smiled, feeling the truth of his words. She had given without expectation once, and that act had rippled outward, touching countless lives, including her own. Despite her growing confidence, challenges remained. Balancing responsibility with compassion was not always easy. Some days, bureaucratic obstacles, funding delays, and interpersonal conflicts tested her patience. But Clara found a rhythm. She listened, adapted, and approached each situation with thoughtfulness and courage. She also began mentoring new volunteers, teaching them the same lessons she had learned. Empathy matters, small acts of kindness have profound consequences, and trust in yourself is essential. Her influence extended beyond programs and budgets. She was shaping a culture of care within the organization. One evening, as the office emptied and the city lights reflected in the tall windows, Mr. Gray approached her. "Clara," he said softly, "you've grown beyond what I imagined. You're not just helping people, you're inspiring them, and that's rare." Clara looked out at the skyline, feeling the weight and significance of her journey. I couldn't have done this without your guidance," she admitted. "Guidance only works when the person is willing to act," he replied. "You acted, you trusted, you cared. That's why you're here." As winter approached, Clara realized she had truly stepped into a world that once seemed unimaginable. She was no longer just a young woman offering small kindnesses to strangers. She was a leader, a strategist, a force for change. Yet she remained humble, never losing sight of the bench in the park, the chocolate croissant, and the lesson that every small act could change a life, sometimes more than one. And she knew deep in her heart that her story was far from over. There were more lives to touch, more challenges to face, and more opportunities to create positive change. What had begun as a simple, selfless gesture was now a ripple in a much larger current, one that would carry her far beyond anything she had ever imagined. Spring had arrived, casting a fresh golden light over the city. Clara stood on the terrace of the nonprofit headquarters, overlooking the bustling streets below. What had once been distant, unimaginable spaces now felt like a part of her world. She had grown in ways she never anticipated, not just in skill, but in confidence, purpose, and understanding. The past months had been a whirlwind of responsibilities, challenges, and triumphs. She had designed and implemented programs that touched thousands of lives, coordinated resources efficiently, and inspired both colleagues and volunteers. Her influence was tangible, her leadership respected. And yet, through it all, she had remained humble, remembering the moment it all began. The chocolate croissant, the bench, and the simple act of giving without expectation. One morning, Clara was called into a conference room. To her surprise, it was filled with people she recognized from her early projects, alongside city officials, donors, and media representatives. Mr. Gray stood at the head of the room, his expression calm but commanding. "Clara," he began, his voice steady, "today we celebrate not just the success of our programs, but the extraordinary person behind them, someone whose compassion, courage, and determination have transformed lives and inspired countless others." Confused, Clara looked around. I don't understand," she stammered. Mr. Gray smiled. You do, in fact. You've always acted with integrity and empathy, without ever asking for recognition. That's why this is important. Then came the moment that left Clara breathless. Mr. Gray revealed his identity, not just as a benefactor or supporter of community initiatives, but as Alexander Gray, billionaire CEO of one of the largest philanthropic organizations in the country. The very man she had encountered on that park bench weeks ago, the seemingly ordinary, sad figure, was a man whose decisions influenced thousands, whose power could change the world. The room erupted in applause as colleagues, officials, and volunteers recognized Clara's contributions. She felt a rush of emotions, disbelief, pride, humility, and gratitude. Mr. Gray's eyes met hers across the room, a silent acknowledgement of the journey they had shared. Clara realized that her act of kindness, the simple decision to offer her only treat to a stranger, had created ripples far beyond anything she could have imagined. That small gesture had introduced her to a world of influence, opportunity, and purpose, and she had embraced it fully, not for recognition, but because it aligned with her values. In the following weeks, Clara's role expanded further. She became a central figure in planning citywide initiatives, mentoring young volunteers and advocating for programs that directly impacted underserved communities. Her story, shared by Mr. Gray and others, inspired countless individuals to recognize the power of small acts of kindness and the importance of believing in themselves. Despite her newfound visibility and influence, Clara remained grounded. She visited the park regularly, sometimes sitting on the same bench where her journey began. She offered smiles, conversation, and occasionally a pastry to strangers who seemed in need of a small spark of hope. The act itself had never changed, only the scale of its impact. One evening, as she walked through the park with Mr. Gray, now a trusted mentor and friend, Clara reflected on how far she had come. It's hard to believe, she said softly, that everything started with a croissant. He chuckled. It's true. Sometimes the smallest gestures have the largest consequences. You didn't know who I was, yet you acted with kindness. That courage and generosity set everything into motion. Clara smiled, feeling the weight of those words. She realized that life wasn't about waiting for opportunity, it was about creating it, often in ways that seemed insignificant at the time. Her journey from a humble young woman in a bakery to a leader in philanthropy was proof that one act of selflessness could indeed change a life, sometimes many lives. Months later, as Clara oversaw a new program launch for at-risk youth, she noticed a young woman hesitating near the benches outside the community center, clutching a small bag. Clara approached her with a gentle smile. Would you like to sit for a moment? I can share this with you. The young woman blinked, surprise and relief mingling on her face, and nodded. Clara handed her a snack from the bag she had brought. In that moment, Clara saw the cycle continuing, the ripple effect of kindness, compassion, and human connection extending outward, touching lives one small gesture at a time. She thought of her journey, the croissant, the park bench, Mr. Gray, and the countless challenges and opportunities she had faced. She had been seen, trusted, and guided, but above all, she had acted with an open heart. That had made all the difference, and as she watched the young woman's smile grow, Clara knew without doubt that her life, and the lives of many others, had been forever transformed by a single selfless act.